And hello there. It's quite cool to be back. It's been too long. Life got just a little bit interesting over December, which kind of stopped me from coming when I wanted to after I did the original stream. It's a fun mixture of long COVID and a cold. Really managed to wipe the floor with me. It's still there a little bit now, but it's mainly gone away. So I thought I'd come back. I was supposed to actually be back this week. I was planning on doing a stream on Wednesday, but life got in the way. So it's like, okay, I'll do Friday. And life got in the way again. So it's going to be a very quick stream today. I'm going to be here for about an hour or so, but there's a few things that I really wanted to get finished. And I just really wanted to get into the cadence of coming up here and doing it. So who do we have in the chat here today? And here's where my lack of preparation completely throws me off. We have OX12B. Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today? Right, so what are we going to be up to today? Since we've only got an hour, it seems to be good to get started right on time. Well, I want to tell a little bit about what's happening in my life right now. On top of the fact that, currently trying to get over long COVID. Let you know what I'm going to be up to in the upcoming month or so. And then today, I'm going to show you what I did wrong in the last stream. I was trying to get .NET7 working, and it really didn't work. And it was because I was a little bit of an idiot. So I got that working whilst off stream because I wanted to get that update done, and it was taking too long. But I'm going to show you what I did wrong there anyway. Then I want to fix a bug that I've got in my site right now, which has been there for an age, and it's one of those things that I know I need to do. So that's going to be fixed today. And after that, have a look at the plans that I've got for the future that I want to do over the next, 6 months on this site with the streams that I'm going to be doing. And before we go any further, let's get rid of... How do we do this again? I want to ban you. There we go. Because we don't need spam messages in the chat. Excuse me. I forgot my headphones. I just ran back upstairs and the whole long COVID thing. Breathing is sometimes a little bit interesting, but that'll be okay. So what have I been up to? Well, number one, on Friday, the reason why I couldn't actually do the stream on Friday when I wanted to is for years I've been wanting to get a tattoo. And it was supposed to be done in December, but first of all, my tattoo artist was ill, so she had to cancel. Then I was ill, so I had to cancel. And it actually happened on Friday. So I'm currently recovering from 2 bigger than I expected tattoos on my legs. A little bit of a nod to my favorite fandom there. It's 2 heart balloons, 2 3D heart balloons. And the string for each balloon has a heartbeat in it. I'm a huge fan of Doctor Who, so 2 hearts, 2 heartbeats. I'm hoping that people that are really into Doctor Who will kind of guess. And people that aren't into Doctor Who, it's just 2 really cute tattoos. Thank you so much. It's scary thing is, I thought this was going to be it. I was terrified of getting on that table and actually having the tattoos done. Actually, one, it hurt way less than I was expecting. And it's such a cathartic pain. It's I guess it releases endorphins while it's being done because it's something I've been wanting for an age. But yeah, it's whilst I was on there with the pain in my leg, I was planning out the next ones in my head. So maybe March, April, I'm going to make another appointment and see what the next one is. I have heard that it never ends at one appointment. So we'll see where we go next. It's I've not put any pictures of them up on Twitter yet or on Mastodon. Because I want to wait for them to heal just a little bit first. And then I'm going to put them up and hopefully they're going to look awesome So that's one thing that I've been up to. And the other thing I've been up to this week is I've done my first talk of 2023, which was at Virtual Azure Community Day. Drove to the Azure Lowlands studio in Utrecht. It was great seeing people sitting on a stage, having a chat before I did my talk, and then giving my first talk of the year. And it was also the first time going through my latest talk that I've just finished writing. Really cool, because I've seen a few things that I can kind of improve there. So I'm just currently tweaking that. And then next week I get to give it again. But yeah, in upcoming conferences. So I've got 4 of those coming up. 4 of those? 3 of those coming up in the coming weeks. I have NDC London. So on Wednesday, I travel to the UK. On Friday, I get to give my talk on the NDC stage. Really can't wait for that. It's always good fun to be there. Then in February, I get to go back to Stockholm, and I get to go back to the conference that will always have an amazing place in my heart, and that is Sveitug in Stockholm, the first place I did my first ever talk, and I get to go back again. Got another new talk to give there, which is going to be a very personal talk about my mental health journey, the things that I do in order to, or the things I did in order to get into speaking, how I coped with my first talk, and then just looking at some of the things that speaking gives back, because it does cost a huge amount of energy, but I also get quite a lot back from it, which is why I keep on doing it. The day after Sveitug, I get to go back to .NET Front-Ends Day, which for the last 2 years has been a virtual conference, and this year it's nicely hybrid. So there is an in-person conference in Stockholm, but it's also going to be sent out live for the virtual audience. So it's going to be nice actually going to that conference and seeing the people as opposed to just joining for my session, which is what I've been doing the last couple of years. And then there's a few more things in the works that will come out in a few weeks or so. And well, I'm trying to work on meetups this year. Last year was all conferences. Awesome fun. But this year, I really want to try and do some more meetups as well. It's try and get back to the local community, and it's, yeah, interact a little bit more than you sometimes can at the big conferences. And lastly, before I go back to the chat, I'm planning later this year to give my first kind of mini workshop. Somebody approached me and asked me if I'd want to do a long talk. So I think 2-3 hours or so. It's like, I can do a talk for 2-3 hours, but it'd be a lot more fun to just do a workshop, get people to bring their laptops in. And basically some of the talks that I've got, I'm going to mash them together and try and do that in a way that everybody in the room, by the time we get to the end of the session, they've got things working inside of Azure, things deployed, and they get a little bit of knowledge out of that, as opposed to just listening to me talk for 3 hours. So that's what's going to be going on in my life over the next few weeks and months, and that's why I am absolutely out of time right now. But yeah, I'm back. I'm back for another 45 minutes or so, so we'll get on in a second. But we have another comment in the chat. You know, my partner works at a tattoo parlor. The most interesting ones I've done was a couple of months ago when they did a collab with a pet store that celebrated an anniversary. Awesome. Getting a chanterelle tattoo and a dog tattoo on the leg while lying on your stomach, looking at bags of dog food. Sure wasn't something I ever thought I'd do. I can see that. That's an interesting experience, because that's an entirely different situation than I guess you're used to with tattoos. It's mine was in this great little tattoo shop in Broekelen in the Netherlands. And an ex-colleague of mine went there over the summer and got an awesome tattoo, just the kind of style I was looking for. So I got her recommendation to go there. Really nice environment, really relaxing setup, just some awesome music. So I spent like 90 minutes just listening to David Bowie, reading the Discworld, other 80s music, whilst she did the amazing work on my legs. Also on the back of my leg, so also face down for 90 minutes. And yeah, it was not what I was expecting it to be, but it was a whole lot of fun. Okay, shall we get on then and actually take a look at some code before I run out of time and have to run off again? So let's see if I can find the right thing here. Is that okay over the stream, or do I need to zoom in just a little bit to make that text better? If you let me know, then I'll look into it. But what did I have to change last time when I was updating everything to .NET 7? Well, it's a tad small but readable. You know what? If it's a tad small but readable, then we will improve this. Let's kick up the resolution just a little bit. There we go. Is that a little bit better? Hopefully that's just a small bit better. We got the API working because we totally cheated on the API. We just recreated the project because I was going from not only .NET 6 to .NET 7, but I was also going from a in-process Azure function to an isolated, because .NET 7 is always isolated. So I cheated there. I just made a new solution, made a new project, copied the stuff across. That one worked fine. My tests worked fine. My models worked fine. The only thing that didn't work was the client. I updated it to .NET 7. I tried to get everything working, and it just wouldn't. Just refused to load, giving me a really weird error, which wasn't descriptive at all. It was complaining some weird JavaScript error, which for a Blazor application is a bit odd. Turns out I was just being a little bit of an idiot. Inside our Nugget packages here, we have the WebAssembly and the WebAssembly core components. Now, I say I'm going to update these two again anyway, because it seems that they're still slightly out of date. But the problem that I had with them, the reason why everything went wrong on me, is because I forgot to touch them at all. I had turned the client into .NET 7, but those two ASP.NET Core WebAssemblies were both still running on .NET 6. And of course, that doesn't talk to each other. It all went boom. And yeah, thankfully, it was an easy fix, but it's just a little bit of oh, you didn't really make that mistake, did you? And yeah, I really did. Okay, let's give this a run after updating those once again, and then we'll have a look at the bug that I want to fix today. So we're going to run this up. I believe I've got I've got my static web app, my SWA CLI running here. So once the app loads, in theory, I should just be able to run it straight away without doing anything. Let's open a new tab and take a look. Localhost 280. It looks like it's loading. It looks like it's doing things in the background. We have the pre-rendered stuff there. And there's my latest blog post that I did a couple of weeks ago. Really enjoyed doing this blog post, by the way. It's somebody asked me for my thoughts on the laptop that I'm using for work. And since it is a serious investment when you get a laptop, I didn't just want to say, yeah, it's fine. I really wanted to go into what I loved about it and what I hated about it to give the nice rounded view. Once I spent half an hour typing these messages, it was obvious that this should actually be a blog post. So I set that up and ran it off. I'm going to try and do a blog post every 2 weeks. I'm going to try and increase my blog post cadence and my streaming cadence to kind of work my way up just a little bit from where I am right now. It's hopefully I have enough time to do it. We'll find out. Anyway, the app's running. It builds. Everything works as it should do. So now we can have a look at the bug and get working on that. Now, the bug. In my application, I have a page for my speaking engagements. And I have two different places on the site for what I do. So number one is the things that are coming up in the future. Number two is the list of things that I've done in the past. Now, I'm going to be making changes to this page over the course of the next few months anyway. But right now we have an issue in that the conferences that are currently running right now show us in the past. So if I'm going to a one-day conference and you go to my speaking page, then it says that, hey, this already happened in the past, and it just shows you the next one coming up. The way that I'm going to fix this is by changing the model that I use to transfer the data around. Right now, I'm using a date time. When I first wrote this site, I tried to use a date only, but at that point, date onlys wouldn't serialize properly. So that just gave me all sorts of issues. We can now serialize date times. They work absolutely fine. So we're going to change a date onlys. So we're going to change all of the date times and bring it up to date just a little bit. So I have my engagement here. Now, there's a whole load of stuff in here, which actually right now I don't use at all. But that's the stuff that I'm going to be fixing over the summer. But what we do want to do, first of all, is just change these two dates times for the conference start and the conference end to be date onlys. And this is going to make a whole lot of things break. First thing that's going to break is my engagements page, because I have my where on my list of conferences, and of course, date time doesn't work. So we're going to add a date only from date time, and then we want date time now. And then I want to do the same thing again on the next line down. And then I just need to do one more change, which is going to be the really annoying one. Remember in the last stream that I did, I pointed out the fact that I had cheated for how I get the data in for the conferences I'm speaking at. Well, now we're going to hit the issue with that, because I now need to change every single one of these, because it's just a big long list of everything running date times, which is all going to go wrong. So thankfully, it is a really easy fix here. We're just going to change date times into date onlys, and we are going to replace everything. Now, if I've done everything right here, I should now build. Fingers crossed. You're going to do what it's supposed to. It built. Let's see if it still works, shall we? So for those that don't know, the difference between a date time and a date only, it is pretty much what it sounds like. Traditionally, we've always had date times inside of C#, where you have the date, the hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, whatever. This has always been a problem when you only want either the time or the date from that variable. And for my conferences, I'm really only interested in the date, because the time doesn't matter. It's just from this date to the other. Problem is, when you are trying to compare dates and things and you're using a date time, if there is any time component in there, that can throw everything off, which is what the bug in my site was. I was comparing the date time and it was saying, hey, if the date is before the current date time, then don't show it. And of course it's before the date time, because I'm just setting up the year, the month, and the day in my engagements. But in the for the date time, it is the year, date, month, and the hours. So it was always X amount of hours, minutes, and seconds after the engagement that was coming through. Rather than try and do a whole load of interesting stuff to fix that, I thought it would just be much easier just to fix the actual type that we want and use this date only struct, where there is no time component to it. We only look at the date section. There's also a time only equivalent of this as well for when you don't care about the date, but you just want to know the time. So that is currently working. That's all good. What we want to do now is test that the bug's fixed. So for this, what we're going to do, we're going to cheat. I'm going to add a new talk to my list. And this is where cheating in the way that I cheated in the past is really dangerous because, if I forget and check this in, then I'm going to have incorrect data in my site, which is obviously bad. I believe today's the 22nd. So let's restart that with the new data in place. I can't believe it's 2023 already, by the way. Time has absolutely flown. Can't believe we're nearly a month into 2023. I don't know if that's what happens when you start to get older. Time really starts to fly past you. So we want localhost 4280 again. Let's see what we get here. And there we go. We have Sunday, January the 22nd, 2023. We have this new conference coming in place. So that's my book fixed. So I'm going to push all of this up now to the site. And then we're going to start to talk about what I want to do next with the website and come up and make a bit of a plan. I said I was only going to be going for an hour today, but you know what? I think we might actually finish just a little bit early. So I apologize about that. I was expecting this to take longer than it was and have to fight things that I didn't have to fight. So what have we done? Let's check what we're actually pushing up first, shall we? So I have changed all of my engagements to use date only. That one is correct. Yep. I've changed my page so that we are checking that correctly with a date only from date time, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. I've changed the project file just because I've updated those two packages from the preview to the 702 version, which I really shouldn't have done inside of this change as well, but okay. And then I've changed the model for my engagements, again, just to use the date time. This is something that I always try and do when I'm making commits, by the way. I'm really not a fan of working with pull requests if I can get away with it. I'd rather do the checking on the fly, keep everything small. And certainly in this case, we can just check the 4 files that are going up and double check everything's going right. When I'm pair programming with somebody, this is also the way that I prefer to check what is going into my trunk. So we have, I'm going to have to put an and in my commits. I don't like putting ands in my commits. Change date time to date only. And we have updated or bumped. What packages did we bump? Bumped Blazor, web assembly. We're going to commit that and we're going to push that up to production now. And I'm just going to have a quick check and make sure that the pipeline's been triggered. Always useful. Yep. So that is what I wanted to get done today. And hello there, Fuel Snable. How's it going? Thank you for joining me. It's going to be a little bit of a fast stream today. I was planning on streaming for an hour because I'm just a little bit rushed with absolutely zero time. It might actually be faster than that because it seems that the bug that I was expecting to spend half an hour fighting actually took 5 minutes to fix. So I guess I should apologize for that. But welcome for joining. Thank you for joining us anyway. So over the coming months, there's a few things that I really want to do. I want to do lots of changes to my website. I'm going to start with that whole embarrassing file. This whole embarrassing file has to go. So I think job number one, which is going to happen next time I'm streaming from home, is this engagements list is going to move to Cosmos DB. Get rid of that. We're going to do this properly. And we're going to do that in 2 steps. The first step that we're going to do is just literally moving all of this data up to Cosmos. And the second step is I'm going to add authentication to the site so that I can log in and I can add new engagements as and when I need them. And yeah, Cosmos DB. Why Cosmos DB? Because I want to play with it and because the amount of data and the amount of traffic that I'm expecting, I can use the free tier. And if I'm using the free tier, then it's not going to cost me anything. And I get to, see how it works and what things happen with it. I'm also going to be showing the Cosmos DB emulator when I do that and having a play with that. So we can see how things work locally before we move up to production. And also see how we can get a nice local database that rather than doing the things that I just had to do with adding a new engagement that could have gone up to production, but really like, okay, how can we just quickly add things and play with it and see what happens? The Azure free tiers, that's a really good question. How do the Azure free tiers work? This is the important question. When you sign up for an Azure free tier, the word free, I think, is a slight misnomer. It is a pay-as-you-go account. And for the first year, you get an amount of services free. For life, there is an amount of services which are always free. And the most important, for the first month, you get, I believe, $200 that you can use to play with different resources and see how it works. Let me just get back on the screen properly here. So that is kind of like the first one. Now, for that first month, those $200 in credits that you get, that has a couple of limitations. There are certain services that you can't play with because they cost more than $200. And it is a spending limit for that first month. So if you do something wrong, you will reach that $200 and that will be it. It will then stop working for you. Unless you remove the spending limit, and then obviously it goes onto your credit card. After that first month, there is no way to put a spending limit on your account as far as I can see. And that is just a little bit scary in my view. I would much rather be able to say, look, if I go over this amount, I really want you to just take everything out of the air. It's fine. This isn't a production situation. You can turn everything off, and I would rather that than paying money. So what you have to do is set up budgets inside of your Azure subscription, and then you get emails saying, hey, you're about to go over your budget, and you can just quickly turn things off. Downside is if you are playing with certain resources, you can still get massive bills. there are some resources that you don't pay for by the minute or the hour or whatever. You pay for them by the month. And if you create them, then you have a big bill in place. So number one, always, always, always do your research. Before you use any new resource, have a check on the pricing, make sure that everything's there. And yeah, definitely put budget alarms in place. Now, this all sounds really scary. However, my website has been running inside of Azure for a couple of years now. Before I became an MVP, all of my demos also ran inside of my personal Azure subscription. And over those 3 years, by just using the things that I needed for the demos and to get my personal projects working, I think I have paid a grand total of about 20 cents. So it isn't something where if you are using standard things, you're going to get very scary bills. So that one, if you're careful with what you're doing, it's not the issue that it sounds like. However, I think I've got to bring this comment on screen because this is it exactly. A friend of mine, they made a mistake in their company. They spent 10 times their monthly cost in just 10 days. Yes. And that's more than possible in Azure. I don't know if this is AWS, but it's also more than possible in Azure. The two scariest stories that I've heard. One was a colleague of mine who was practicing something in Azure in their own subscription, and they spent like 25 euros in a week before they noticed that that was coming in. It was like, whoa, do you mean to be spending that? And they didn't, and they canceled everything to stop it. The other one was a lot bigger and a lot scarier situation. In my previous company, we had a hackathon week, and the idea was that all the developers who didn't at that time do anything in Azure, we were going to play with different Azure resources and see what we could do with it. My boss at the time asked what we were doing to make sure that we didn't do anything, how can we say, daft. In his previous company, they had a similar hackathon type week, and they indeed did exactly this. They provisioned a resource, and it turned out that that resource was thousands per month. And it was one of those resources where you just paid. If you had it provisioned, that was it. You had that bill on your doorstep for the month. I think the same as you say here. It's they called support and they negotiated it down because it was a mistake. And Microsoft don't want to scare people off too much, I assume, in using Azure. So they stopped the resource, they took it out, and they managed to rectify the mistake. But it is a very good warning of when you're playing with these resources, really do double check what it is that you need. For example, when I was doing my demos, I needed an app service plan. It was before static web apps came into play. There are some things that I use app services for anyway over static web apps. And in all of my demos, it was free because I always took the development layer, and that is free. You only get 60 minutes of compute time a day, but for a demo, 60 minutes is absolutely fine. If I'd have decided to actually create a production environment, that would have cost me a lot more, because then you're talking resources that can cost anywhere from 120 to 500 euros a month. And yeah, for what I was doing, that was just not necessary. So bearing that in mind is really important. And again, yeah, devs creating clusters for exploratory analysis, and then they forget to turn them off over the weekend. I have done this inside of my Visual Studio subscription Azure resource. I actually did it 1 month again at my previous company. And yeah, I did something on the Friday, and then when I came back on the Monday, I got an email saying, "You've used up all of your credits. You can't do anything until the next billing period." And it was because I had one resource running that really shouldn't have been. And yeah, €1,000 down the drain. Oopsie. It's, yeah, some of those oopsies can be quite big oopsies. And we have a last comment here. It's much better than AWS. I paid $1 a month for a system VPC and oh, wowza, really? Oh, that's just annoying. You know, I've wanted to play with AWS. I've not actually played with it yet, and you're now scaring me. It will still happen at some point. But yeah, so that's why I'm using Cosmos DB in the free tier. Now, the Cosmos DB free tier is quite cool. You get, I believe, 25 gigs of storage, and you get 1,400 RUs. Is it RUs or RUs per second? But you get 1,400 included for free every month. Then when you reach the limit of that, when you create your free account, it does actually have a nice checkbox that says, don't spend more than this. So if you do accidentally do more than that, say I suddenly get humongous amounts of visitors to the site or whatever else, and it starts to get expensive, all that happens is my site will go offline and I will swear a little bit and look at it and figure out what I have to do. But it won't actually cost me ridiculous amounts of money. So that's how I'm going to be doing that for the Cosmos DB. That was a one side. What do we have here? Yeah, but it is irritating. It's €1 per month. Yeah, that's kind of fine, but it is really irritating. That's got to get annoying after a while. And the fact that you just absolutely can't remove it is just, that must constantly grate. And then we also had a DD metric that cost, wowzer, $8,000 a month, and nobody was looking at it. That's got to get interesting after a while. I have seen that in other places where people made SQL Server databases inside of Azure for development environments, and nobody looked at those. And I think over the course of a month, there was like 4 or 5 of these things costing thousands per month that nobody was using because they kept on getting made and nobody cleaned up after them. It's yeah, it's, you know, it's that wonderful cloud thing. Running in the cloud is great because you only pay for what you provision and use. But that's only fine until you do stuff and forget and don't unprovision it. And then it comes back to bite you. So it's always good to keep these things under control and make sure that you keep them, yeah, just keep an eye on them. Make sure that you're not paying for stuff that you don't need to. So that's number one that we're going to be doing. We are going to be getting the engagements working. Then we're going to have a look at what we can do for the blog posts, because I've done what I wanted to do with the blog post, which is I read them from dev.to and I put them in the site. So if we have a look in my blog post section, that's localhost. I don't want localhost, do I? Shall we load the site up and see if our new changes have actually worked? Well, the blog posts work. And there's my speak. See, I've done it. I forgot to remove the test data. I think I need to fix that. Let's get that back on the screen so you can see. And let's remove that test data. And then we will redeploy. And this is why I'm going to get rid of this file, because this was a really cheap hack that I used in order to get this working. And it's all coming home to roost now. those awesome ones that you have when you I do this quickly and I will come back and do it properly later. No, you won't. Yes, so the blog post, the next one that I'm going to be doing. This is all coming from dev.to. So if we go to dev.to, we have this API here. API articles, and then you can pass in the username. This is where my data comes from. And then I transform this into something that I want to use. And that's what I put on my site so that I can actually see the things that I want to see. This was always supposed to be a stopgap. When I decided to do my website, I was really doing it so that I could learn some new things and play about with technology and, have some fun. And I'm going to be putting my own editor on the website as well, so that I can write the blog posts on my domain. I am still going to post to dev.to because I think it's a decent platform and I'd like to carry on there. But rather than doing everything right now via dev.to when it comes to my site, I want to do it the other way around. I want my blog posts to be made on my site, stored on my site, and displayed from my site, and I want to cross-post to dev.to to see if I can get that working. And then I want to do a second one for the pictures. At the moment, this all comes from WordPress, which is a site that I don't post to as often as I should do because I kind of didn't really have time to carry on doing the photography I wanted to do. But I want to make sure that this also, again, I want it to be contained inside of its own thing. So that's one side of what I want to do in the coming time for my website. The other one that I want to do right now, if I refresh this page, you see, first of all, that it goes through several different ways of getting to be the actual website. And that's because... Hello there, Tyndall. And yeah, it's I looked at Medium, but I decided to go to dev.to, but I want it on my platform. I want stacyclouds.net to be my place on the web rather than having to go to all of the different places. So yeah, it's having it on my platform is what I want. So yeah, we're going to be doing that side. And then the other one is the pre-rendering, which I have right now, is awful, but it kind of worked. And that is, I have an app. If I run my application locally, it uses Playwright to skim the website, to get the pages that I want to be pre-rendered, so that something appears on the screen while it's waiting to be loaded. And then it loads the actual data and it comes in. Plus side of there is, of course, when you scrape, or when you get a web crawler, there's information there that they can get. This is an SWA that needs JavaScript. It runs with WebAssembly. And before I had the pre-rendering in place, the only thing that Google would display when you search for my site was the error message, because that's the only thing that it could read. So, yeah, I want to do that one properly. And I think I want to do it on two sides here. I have seen other people with static web apps, and they actually have a separate location to send web crawlers to that isn't nicely CSS'd or anything, but it's really easy to scrape the data that you need in order to get the contents of your site. And I want to figure out how that's done and have a play with that. And then I want to see what I want to do for the pre-rendering for the site itself, or even if I want to do pre-rendering for the site, or whether or not I'm just going to accept that it takes a second to load for that first load and just let that happen and just make that pretty. That we will come to over the summer and see what happens. And yeah, indeed, you remember someone saying something about working on your own brand. I wonder who that could have possibly been. I have no idea. Now we have Really like Dev2 in the beginning, but now it's just build your own Flutter app in 10 minutes and like on repeat, which is fine, but it gets old real quick. I've seen an amount of that type of thing. I do still see some nice articles come across, but I'm going to be honest, I spot most of those from Twitter than I do from Dev2 itself. And yeah, it still goes back to that tweet that I read back in 2020, 2021, when I started writing my own website of the whole. If I write some awesome stuff there, then dev.2 gets lots of links from that, which is awesome. Nice platform, like I say. But it's like, hey, dev.2 has awesome content, and I'd rather get some awesome content on my site instead. So we'll see where we go from here. And then we have, your biggest worry about Blazor and hybrid and handover is possible. Hybrid and handover is possible, but not with a static web app. And I want to stick with the static web app because it's so cheap to do, and I don't have any budget for this. So if you do the hybrid and handover, if I remember correctly, that's when you're running Blazor server. So on the Blazor server, you can have CHTML files, and you can pre-build pages, and then you can put the data that's used to build those pages in there, hand it over to the front end. Yeah. You need that server for the first render. And what I have seen other people do is just really, the web crawlers get sent to a different location. So it gets the URL gets rewritten just for web crawlers to a place where it is server rendered. Now I'm thinking web crawlers aren't going to hit my site that often, and I can get just the cheapest possible little server running in the background that's going to handle this and not go wrong. I don't know. I need to research this before I start to build it. I have no idea where to start. So this is going to be quite some research for over the first 6 months, but it'll be nice if we can get it built. So that's kind of some things that I want to do for the site. The last thing that I want to do for the site is improve my CSS. And this bit is really cool. When I built this site, Blazor WebAssembly, when you scaffold up a new project, it comes with, damn it, what's it called? It comes with a CSS framework out of the box. And because I need to remember the name, my brain's going, nope, that's not going to happen for you. But I didn't want to use that because I actually wanted to play with CSS and understand. Thank you, Bootstrap. Thank you, Thindle. Bootstrap. Now, I can see that learning Bootstrap is useful, but I thought before I learn Bootstrap, I want to learn some actual CSS and understand what type of things are happening. So I stripped all the CSS out of the site, and I wrote my own from scratch. The actual layout and the files, the actual HTML, it's not that much different. It is slightly different, but it's not that much different to a standard Blazor application. The CSS is completely written by me over the course of about 2 weeks, with me using language that I'm not going to use on air, trying to get the layout as you see it now. It's not good. It looks like somebody spent 2 weeks not knowing what they were doing, trying to figure out how to get this data onto their website. Last November, I was hosting for Build Stuff in Lithuania. So we have Build Stuff. And on the final day, I was hosting the front end room. And it was accessibility, it was design, super interesting, even though I'm not a front end developer. And I believe the second talk of the day was by Amy Kapanek from Australia. And she was talking about CSS Grid. And she is doing this grid layout on the fly in this 50-minute session. And it's like, she's just recreated what took me 2 weeks to do, and mine is hacky as anything, and there's way too much I don't know what's in there. And I really want her help. So after the conference was over, we were chatting, and I asked him, actually, I said, it's a shame that you are in Australia because it would be awesome if you would join my stream. And what you've just done in that talk, if you could do that with me on stream, that would be fantastic. And it started with, well, if you can do an early stream, then you can do early, I can do late, and we can do this. And they're like, cool, that can work. But we're also both in NDC London next week. So I have organized 60 to 90 minutes in the studio at NDC London. I don't know the exact time yet. I'm waiting to see the schedule, but when I know it, I will put it on all the social media channels that I'm on. And Amy is going to join me live in person. I've got a little bit of a portable studio that I'm taking with me, so my camera is easy to detach and come with me. I've brought myself a half-decent USB microphone that's easy to carry, a ring light, which is easy to take with me. And we're going to spend 60 minutes, hopefully, seeing how we can turn all of the stuff that I've got here into something which is just so much easier to understand in the future, and hopefully is going to give my learning a bit of a boost. So that is going to be awesome. I cannot wait for Thursday to try that one. It's her website. I'm going to put a link to her website in the chat because her website is just absolutely awesome. And basically, this is her own website. I just absolutely adore it. Mine's never going to look this good, but I'd recommend taking a look at it. If you've ever seen any talks of her, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, search for talks of... Oh, you can't see my screen. You know what? It really helps if you can actually see my screen, doesn't it? Yes, Lindell, it's going to be public. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on Twitch. It's not an NDC session. It's just me streaming from NDC. They're just giving me space to do that, and I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we have bandwidth enough to do it. But no, seriously, it's if you can find talks first, go watch them. She is an awesome speaker, and the stuff she does is just fantastic. I can't wait to spend some time with her next week doing that. What do we have here? It's better than spending 2 months and looking like it's made in 2 weeks. But yeah, mine was done in 2 weeks and looks like someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Seriously, if you look at it's so much trial and error going on here. Where is my CSS for my page? I was also learning Blazor at the same time as learning CSS, so I don't know if this is set up right at all, but it works. I have a card container, and inside of my card container, I just have a flex display. And then, is it my card? Yes. So in my card, I have an object with padding around it, and I don't know how I got to these figures for the padding, aside from just playing with it and hoping that it kind of worked. Then we have, for the first child, we have to set the margin left to 0 because otherwise it's too far into the site. And then for the different screen sizes that we've got, if we are on a big screen, then 3n+1 objects also have to have margin left of 0. Seriously, this was just me pulling my hair out. If the screen is medium, then we have every 2n+1 has to have a 0 margin left. And then if the screen is less than 900 pixels, we don't have a margin left. Otherwise, things just go horribly wrong. I think the CSS that we're going to see next week when it's done is going to be so much simpler than this because Grid can take care of all of this for us and make it look super awesome. You miss tables. On the one hand, I miss tables, and on the other hand, I remember trying to get the layout right with those tables, and I don't know which was harder, fighting this or fighting the tables. Oh, thank you. Yeah, really, that comment means a lot to me. It's I think my main issue with it is too complex. There are easier ways of doing this that I am not currently doing. So I'm not gonna throw this away. It's in a GitHub repo, so I can always go back and look at it. I can see where it's going to be useful in other places. But for what I'm doing inside of this screen, I just think there's easier things with this. And it's seriously, I'm expecting this to be about half the size that it is once I'm finished with Amy next week. The other one that I really want to change, and that is on my main page. That would be where my main layout, I believe. Nope. Okay, where's that? Is it my nav menu? Remembering where you put code is hard. Yeah, so I have my header image and my navigation buttons, and they also don't quite work as they should do. And this is another one. I honestly don't know what half of this stuff does. The only thing that I know is that eventually it worked. That is literally the only thing that I can say about all of this stuff. There is so much in here which just shouldn't be here. So I've got other stuff that I need to fix as I move along. So we have that coming up next week. Outside of my own site, there's other stuff that I want to do on the streams over the coming months. Number one, for my latest talk, I needed to interact with my DNS provider into their API. And they have some SDKs for various different languages. They don't have an SDK for .NET. So as soon as I'm using it in my talk, and as soon as I want to do stuff and actually make it available anyway, I actually want to write an SDK that can access their API in a usable way for C# developers and see what happens there. So that's one thing I want to do, write that SDK. The other one is I just want to learn new things. There's stuff on my radar that I really want to learn and play with. .NET MAUI is one of them. That looks cool. And the other one is Azure Container Apps. So I'm going to try and spend some time on both of those over the coming 6 months and try and get from my I know absolutely nothing level to being able to at least be comfortable with it and see what happens. So that's what we have coming up over the coming months. And of course, things that I'm doing for work. If any of that doesn't actually contain IP for work, so if I'm doing some generic stuff, I'm going to be putting that on stream as well so that I can also show you some of the cool stuff that I work on there. Last comments. You prefer readable over small and short. I do prefer readable over small and short. But I think the fun one with the CSS grid is it's not a trick. It is a nice way of writing CSS, and it should be both small, short, and readable. So it's not going to be full of like really little tricks that in 3 months' time I'm not going to be able to change. It should give me a base that I can build off. That's the idea. I'm not sure if it works on CSS, but Control TT. What does Control TT do? I'm going to try it and see what happens. Control TT. I'm curious what Control TT. Oh, searches. Yes. No, apparently it doesn't work for CSS. That's a shame. I need to put the dot in there. Yep. I'm going to take a better look at that and try and have a play, see whether or not it can do anything for CSS. Because the CSS does actually come up. You do get IntelliSense for CSS, so I don't see why that shouldn't work. I'm going to have a look. And showing ignorance, isn't container apps basically app services? No, it's not. You have two different things. You have is it container instances, which I believe run on app services, and that's just a way of deploying a single container. But I was going to say this year, it's January. Last year, Microsoft came out with Azure Container Apps, and what it basically is a simplified way to use the AKS service. If I might be lying here, but I believe it runs on top of the AKS service, but you don't need to be an AKS expert in order to use it. I'm not an AKS expert. I will never be an AKS expert because I'm never going to be a Kubernetes expert. But it gives you that simplified access. If you don't need to know the guts of Kubernetes in order to run your site, then it gives you an amount of the functionality and an amount of the possibilities without actually having to go down to that level. So it's more AKS than it is app services. My opinion is that every dev, including me, thinks they are writing the most pragmatic and readable code. I know a lot of devs that do. I kind of fall outside of that. That's the issues with my head. I always worry that I am writing absolutely awful code and nobody is ever going to be able to read it. And I ask people for way too much input for stuff that I should just have a little bit of confidence about in my code. But I'm working on that one. But I do find that even the stuff that I write, even if I do think it's good, and even if other people think it's good, I can then come back in 6 months' time and go, what was I thinking? We'll find out. Then the code reviewer, depending on their view of pragmatic code, either criticizes my code for being too complicated or too stupid. Oh, I get that one. This reminds me of one of the talks that I did. It's level of complexity is something which is never going to please everyone. I did a talk a couple of years ago, and it was basically just using a web API, talking to a queue, which was read by a function that wrote to a storage table. I had two complaints from the same session, with one complaint saying, this was just too simple. Why did you even bother demoing this? And another complaint saying, how can you say this is for beginners? This is so complex. You cannot say that this is for beginners. And that was kind of the point where I thought, okay, the whole thing of you can't please everyone is absolutely true. It's like, okay, if I get one person saying it's too simple, one person saying it's too complex, and a lot of good feedback, then I've probably hit round about the right level. And I think that goes for most code as well. There was one going around Twitter recently. See if I can find that while I'm talking. There was one going around Twitter recently. In the Netherlands, we have something called DigiDay, and that is how we can authenticate ourselves against the government digital access thing. So it's how we access our taxes. It's how we can access our health records, our pension information, that kind of thing. And they open sourced their software because of a freedom of information request recently. And there was a wonderful tweet. I found it. Here it is. So there was a wonderful tweet. The Dutch government was forced to release the source code of their DigiDay digital authentication iOS app. It's written in C#. And we have this function. Get percentage rounds, and then you just have a load of if statements and a load of percentages. Yep, that's the one, Thindle. It is indeed the one that, for the if else, for showing the some kind of progress bar. But the best comments that I've seen about this is everybody is arguing about how it should be improved, whether or not it's good or bad. Every single person can look at this and read exactly what it's doing with a really simple look. Would I do it differently? Possibly, but at the same point, I can look at that and see exactly what it's doing. It's I think one person's readable and another person's readable is never going to be quite the same thing, and the best you can do is find something that works together as a team. The argument every developer had basically was everything I know should be allowed. Everything. Oh, I like it. Yes. Everything I know should be allowed. Everything else is disallowed. I have seen that one a few times. And you did your own version of a Shaded Buddy did a succinct version. You know the really annoying one? I can't get that out of the chat to actually take a look at, but I'm going to have a look after the stream's finished. Very maintainable to if you need 110%, yeah, just add another if statement. It's fine. Yes, exactly. What I would probably do for this these days, to be honest, is use a switch return, because they are just super easy to look at, and I think it's less stuff on screen to get lost, but at the same point, it's just as readable, I think, as this one is. I just enjoy good drama over things that don't matter, and that is why we're software developers. Right, I'm looking at the time. I thank you all so much for this chat for the last half hour. When that bug was fixed so quickly, I was expecting to be done super early and be way too short a time on stream. As is, I'm actually slightly over time. I would love to stay chatting, but unfortunately, I have to get packed and ready for NDC for next week. So I'm going to have to say goodbye. Oh, but seriously, thank you all for joining me. Thanks for the conversation. And I hope to see you on Thursday from NDC. And yeah, see you then. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye, everybody.